So Justin Jennings, pharmacist, welcome to Salt Baked Q&A.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So could you tell us a little bit about how you came to be a pharmacist in the medicinal cannabis world?
Yeah. So I graduated pharmacy school in 2018, and I've worked in a pharmacy that was in the same parking lot as one of the biggest pain clinics in Utah.
Oh, wow.
And so I've seen a lot of opioid prescriptions and patients that have a heavy opioid load in a sense. And I've seen the problems that happen because of that, and I've seen some of the solutions as well. And so because of that, I started looking into some alternatives. I've had at least one, potentially a couple more patients die from opioid overdoses as well. And then it really hit me around a year and a half ago. I had a relative die from an opioid overdose as well. And so then I really started looking into alternative solutions, and then cannabis came up, and then right as that was happening, there's a big push. Prop 2 already passed, and they started this program, and they were starting to look for pharmacists, and so I jumped in, and I basically saw what I could do.
Smart. And where are you originally from, Justin?
Yeah, so I grew up in Utah, born and raised. So
Right.
Yep, haven't lived anywhere else. I've traveled, but haven't lived anywhere else.
Understood. Okay. So excellent. Homegrown medicine. That's superb.
Yeah,
Superb. And how long you've been at the apothecary?
Yeah. So I started in early March. We weren't open at that time, so I was helping out with some other things. But we opened up our Ogden location on May 1st.
Mm-hmm.
I was there to help with the Logan location as well. We opened that on April 1st. So.
And just to clarify, everyone, it's the Perfect Earth Apothecary?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yep, that's right.
And the
Perfect
coordinates
Earth.
are, Justin?
What was that?
The coordinates, so people know where to find you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 3775 Wall Avenue in Ogden.
Awesome. What's living in Ogden like these days?
It's good. I mean, it's sometimes Ogden gets a bad rap, but it's got a lot of positives. It's a great city. So.
Right. So as a pharmacist at the Perfect Earth Apothecary in Ogden, Justin, what does a typical day in the life look like for you?
Yeah. So my primary thing that I do is, consult with patients. That's what 90% of my day is talking with patients. It's anywhere from helping a brand new patient out that hasn't ever tried cannabis. I've even had a couple patients, or I've had one patient at least that was over 100 years old that has never tried cannabis in their life, and this is the first time that they were trying it, right? So, a pretty big change for somebody, in that late of life to try something like this. So, we have those kind of patients. We have more experienced patients, and then we have patients that are following up with their conditions, then to try to isolate a little bit further how to treat it more effectively, their condition. So, that's primarily what I do. And then, I'm the pharmacist in charge there too. So, a lot of the day-to-day things, just what you have to do to run a pharmacy. So, yeah.
What is your, I guess one of the things I like to ask pharmacists is, as we review and become more familiar with both patients in our weekly patient profiles and our pharmacy profiles, what is the most challenging aspect thus far of introducing cannabis as a medicine for you as a pharmacist?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest goals I have, because this is so tough, is bridging the gap between the cannabis community and the medical community. There's been a lot of butting heads in these communities. On the medical side, a lot of times they want to claim that there's not a lot of evidence for cannabis. There's still stigma associated with it.
Justin?
What was that?
What's your view on that, working within the industry? I mean, you see this every day. I mean, I imagine you've probably seen patients change quite dramatically, as you just described with the 100-year-old, right?
Yeah. And so, the stigma is changing, and it's great. I wish it would change faster. There's still issues that I run into that make it tough for people to treat their conditions effectively, because they're worried about the look or anything like that. But yeah, no, within the medical community, I've even seen the change happen in real time, right? where initially when I was talking to a provider that, cannabis wasn't an option, they weren't going to use it. And then now they have a lot of patients that are coming our way, and they're now a proponent for cannabis. And so it is changing. It's just getting the research out there and kind of breaking down that stigma as well, making it more accessible. And
how do you make your patients feel more comfortable, Justin, if I may ask?
Yeah. So, if they're a new patient, I do ask a couple different questions just to see what they're comfortable with, right? So, I see how much of a high that they're willing to get, right? Because sometimes with different conditions, THC is going to be is one of the main cannabinoids in cannabis that helps. There's other cannabinoids as well, but THC is one of the more important ones. And so, if a patient's trying to treat pain or anything like that, sometimes there's going to be a little bit overlap of a high feeling, and if they're completely new to this, they might not be willing to go too far in that direction, right? Or for other personal reasons. And so I see how far they're able to go in that direction. Again, it's not the goal to get a high with treatment here. So that's one of them. And then another factor would be, seeing if they're willing to breathe anything in or not, and going over the pros and cons of that. Some patients just don't want to, and we could start somewhere else. And if they're comfortable starting somewhere else to kind of, dip their toe into the water, see how this is. We start safe. Obviously, we with cannabis dosing, especially for new patients, you got to start. This is, you hear this all the time, I'm sure. Start low, go slow, and just to see if this is going to be an option for them. And then, if they need that quicker kind of relief, right? That only inhalation can really provide, right? And nothing is as fast. Nowhere even close, right? So if you have an acute condition like, pain right now, migraines right now, a panic attack, anxiety, the quickness of inhalation is really important. But some patients don't want to do that, and so it's good to kind of, let them know that we're trying to find an answer that is good for them, but also, we can make a lot of different kind of things work depending on comfort level.
Right. Fascinating. So your early training as a pharmacist, you said, was early 2018? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. So I went, started in 2015, graduated 2018. It was a accelerated program that went through summer as well.
May I ask, Justin, and thank you for that previous response. That's marvelous. Curious to know what place cannabis had in your training. Was there any room for it? Did you study? Did you look at it? I'm curious.
This is a big problem. Because there was a couple slides out of thousands. There's maybe 2 slides on the endocannabinoid system and cannabis in general. We didn't really get educated much on that. So this is going to be pretty important, I think, in the future, that we start educating the medical providers, physicians. Comes down to nurses, PAs, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, everybody. We need to start educating them on cannabis, because there was not a lot of education there. With that said, obviously it's the other parts of my education definitely provide a different kind of framework, right? So, I know about absorption, I know about metabolism, how drugs interact with the body. So that helps, obviously, but with specifically regarding cannabis and cannabis treatment, therapeutics, and that kind of thing, there was not much education. It's been self-study, and that's also another problem when it comes to just trying to find the information out there, right? Because normally with medications, pharmaceuticals, there's companies that are trying to get their medication, out there. And so they're required to do safety, efficacy, do all these different kind of studies that we can refer to. With cannabis, there has not been that. And so it's kind of finding information over here, and really compiling it into something that's more coherent that we could then export to patients.
I think everyone in the green scene is hopeful and full of anticipation for that science to reach us.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, people in the medical community, such as yourself, Justin, as you mentioned, are learning all the time. So could you describe for us some of what you've experienced that's been most impactful to your work as a pharmacist to date in the community?
Yeah. It's really just constantly looking up sources. When you get a question that you don't know the answer to, seeing if there is an answer out there for it. There's definitely some good. What was that?
For instance, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Could you give us an example?
Yeah. There's a great book. It's called Cannabis Pharmacy that's got a large, resource pool of, it cites so many different kinds of studies and emphasizes the scientific part. So I refer to that, but I also refer to, the Canadian government has a monograph for cannabis that shows safety, efficacy, mechanism of action and proposed mechanisms of actions for different kind of conditions as well. So there's a lot of information there too. For as an example, there's actually a misconception on CBD and it being sedating or helping with sleep. Historically, people always would say that CBD is more relaxing and calming, and it is relaxing and calming. It definitely calms you down, but it's not necessarily sleep promoting. Some new evidence is coming out that it could be wake promoting potentially, especially at lower doses, around 1 to 5, maybe 1 to 10 milligrams.
Do you perhaps give us the source? Do you know where that's coming from?
Yeah, it was. So it's from Ethan Russo, is the doctor. It came from one of his books. I actually had to look up that source the other day, but it's not available online. You have to buy the other book. But right. The resource I found is Cannabis Pharmacy, and then it goes to one of his books about CBD. But there's a couple different resources that showed that. I've only looked up the 2 of them though. But
so how does this constant influx of changing information affect your performance? I mean, how do you adapt? Is it on a daily or case by case basis? Are you constantly studying as you work?
Yeah. So I always have tabs pulled up and reading in between consultations if I don't have somebody I'm talking to. And I take notes on if a patient has a question I don't have an answer to, then I look that up. I never fake an answer. That's bad medicine of telling a patient something that you're not quite sure if it's true or not. And so, but yeah, constantly studying, constantly looking things up. And sometimes I have to tell patients that, here's some new information out. So this is, it would potentially benefit you in this way. As long as they know that we're heading in the right direction. I mean, generally with anything with science, right? You might, as long as you're heading in the right direction towards truth in a sense, right? You might overstep one way, overstep the other way, but as long as you're fine tuning it to the actual truth. And that's how medicine is as well, right? So we're saying it helps with this, but then, some evidence say it doesn't. So maybe it might fall kind of in between. It's not always a guarantee, but we're always trying to find what actually is true with regards to the effects and treatment.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. And speaking to the effects of cannabis treatment, medical cannabis treatment, where are you headed regarding terpenes and the testing of terpenes?
Oh, I wish Utah had I don't know if they have the framework or if they're just not doing it potentially, but they don't test for terpenes, right? And so it's frustrating because that would affect the recommendations I make drastically. And I mean, what I'm doing now, if they don't have terpene data, is you could always find information online and extrapolate what terpenes are probably in the strain, and then use that, right? But we can't guarantee that because it depends on how it was grown, on what kind of terpenes come out, right? But if a strain of cannabis normally has a lot of myrcene and then it's caryophyllene and then a little bit of like linalool in it, that would be great for something like pain, inflammation. And so if Leafly or Hytiva or some of these websites that track that lab data show that, then between all the strains that we have, I'll emphasize that one for those patients that need it, right? But I can't guarantee it. And I try to let patients know that. Sometimes I miss out on saying, this one is probably going to be good for this, but we don't have the data yet to kind of hedge it that way. But yeah, terpene information would be huge because, this is one of the primary differences of why one strain might work versus the other, right? It's terpene profile, cannabinoid profile are what we have to go off of right now. There might be more information in the future, but those are the ways that we isolate right now. Some patients respond better to other terpenes. So if a patient finds a strain that really works for their condition, I really emphasize that they write it down, what strain that is, and then we'd be able to see, okay, what most likely the terpene profile was for that strain. And then we could try to, mimic that with like, here's are the strains that we have. Here's the one that's closest, right? Because supply and demand is the biggest issue with Utah right now. And so because of that, we got to make do with what we have.
Understood. Cheers, Justin. I appreciate that. And with regard to terpenes and what we've heard told about for a while now, the entourage effect. In my opinion, as a layperson, as a non-scientist, non-medical professional, does that seem to equate with the way this is really headed? Like some form or variation of the entourage effect is going to be where we find the most efficacy in treatment using marijuana?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, so many different kind of chemicals in the cannabis plant that, and it's, I mean, for example, we know that there's potentially 200 plus cannabinoids. So that would be something like THC, CBD, CBN, CBC, CBG, all those different kinds of cannabinoids. So around 200 plus that that can be found in the plant. Granted, not all of them are going to be in high enough doses to be therapeutic. And then also 200 plus terpenes in the plant. Again, not all of them will be necessarily high enough a dose to be therapeutic, but there's a lot going on. And because of that, it's, we don't want to say it's only cannabinoids, only terpenes, but, because there's not a lot of information out there, we have found, that generally the more of a, full plant extract or full spectrum kind of material, like extract that we have, generally it's a little bit more therapeutic, right? Maybe not necessarily for like a traditional high recreational purpose, right? Usually they're just extracting THC out for that, but there's, different ways to isolate that as well. But yeah, I mean, the call it what you will, entourage effect, anything else, but it's just, the more that you keep it more of a full spectrum, that it keeps everything in there, generally the better. And this is a little more anecdotally, generally the more effective it's been.
Understood. Got it. That's fascinating to know. Thank you, Justin. So what else can you tell us that you've been learning that is exciting you as a medical professional working there at Perfect Earth Apothecary in Ogden?
Yeah. I mean, there's always information out there. So I mean, some of the more important things that patients would benefit from knowing is actually the terpenes and what terpenes are better for what conditions, right? So, if you're really trying to emphasize pain relief, you want terpenes that, myrcene, caryophyllene, even linalool, humulene are going to be helpful there. I mean, there's even more than those, but those are the primary ones. Myrcene gives you a little more of that muscle relaxation, couch lock kind of feeling, right? But then that's going to be helpful for a lot of different kind of conditions, right? Muscle spasticity, that kind of thing. Again, this is one of the issues is there needs to be more information here. So some of this is a little bit more anecdotal, so you're aware. But yeah, so myrcene is going to be extremely helpful there. Caryophyllene is one of the, if not the only terpene that actually can act as a cannabinoid itself. So caryophyllene also binds to CB2 specifically, and CB2 receptors modulate. So it has immunomodulatory factors, but it's also one of the better receptors to bind to or to affect for inflammation. So if you really have some type of autoimmune disease that increases your overall inflammation, then caryophyllene is going to be really important here. If you're trying to isolate for things like mood, caryophyllene helps there too, but limonene is great. If you're trying to help with nausea, limonene is great as well, depression, that kind of thing. And there's so many terpenes out there that it's I don't want to go into all of them right here, but
Right.
but you can kind of see how if a patient has it's as rare it's going to be that only pain that we're trying to treat, right? There's pain, there's anxiety, there's depression, and kind of going through this with the patient to show this would be a great strain for during the day, because if you need help during the day, right? Because it's going to be a little bit more of a mood booster. This is what we're trying to, take care of here. A little bit less of a high feeling, so you stay more functional versus, there's always that going to be that pain relief versus functionality issue during the day. And at night, you could emphasize the pain relief versus functionality. And, so it's just really guiding the patient through what would be best at the time of day for their different kind of conditions. Sometimes you don't treat everything perfectly, but you treat one thing a little bit more fine-tuned, and then you could emphasize different parts of the day. So
Copy that. So, could you tell us, shifting gears here for a moment, Justin, and thank you again.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about what's unique at the Perfect Earth Apothecary.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, we have our own. So we're one of the few pharmacies that has our own cultivation side as well.
Oh,
And so the big issue has been the supply and demand, right? And so we have a temporary facility right now that's supplying some product, but we're in the process of building a very large facility in Brigham right now.
what's your current
And
capacity, if I can ask?
that's not more on the cultivation side, and
Hmm.
I'm more on the pharmacy medical side. So
Hmm.
so I'm speaking a little bit from what I hear at
Sure.
least, and what's happening there. But yeah, no, we're excited about what's going on at our cultivation side. It's going to be once that's up and running, then it's going to ease a lot of our issues with supply because we want to make sure we supply consistent medication for patients. But even on our processing side, we're uh, like, for example, we have these new gummies that have a different kind of absorption technology, makes it more water soluble.
Hmm.
So I mean, this is out there right now, but I'm not sure if Utah has had much access to it. We've already had some of them, but essentially, normally an edible, anything gastrointestinally takes around 1 to 2 hours on average. There's variability here, but it's around 1 to 2 hours to start working. And then the nanoparticles, the nanoemulsion kind of technology, it makes it so it's around 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh,
So it's a
wow.
lot faster. And so, for patients that don't want to, inhale anything, I mean, even if I'm not mistaken, the LDS Church should come out against vaping and inhaling in Utah.
What is
So
nanoemulsion, Justin?
so it's just they're like these. I mean, I'm speaking a little bit out of my element here. I know a little bit about
Okay,
it, but I'm
sure.
not in the biochemistry in that way. But essentially, there's these droplets that it's very lipophilic. THC is it's more of an oily kind of substance, and so
And lipophilic
nanoemulsion.
deals with water, is that right?
So lipophilic means that THC likes to be around other oily
Ah,
or
okay.
fatty kind of molecules.
Oh, so lipid, you mean
Yeah,
lipophilic. Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
And then like hydrophilic, philic is love in a sense, and phobic is
Okay, right.
hate in that sense. So, um, but yeah, I mean, it's breaking it down so it's more water soluble, so it's more readily absorbed.
Cool.
Is the when I
Well,
when I
that's a
looked it up a little
dramatic
bit ago.
difference from 2 hours to half an hour.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah. And so I mean, and it's different kind of effect with edibles as well, right? And so if you get a better effect that way for your condition, but you need that speed still. Um, there's just there's going to be a higher success rate, right? So I mean, this is more anecdotally speaking, but generally patients that have been breathing it in have a higher success rate for treating their conditions for a wider range of conditions. um, that I can hypothesize as to why, but a lot of it has to do with that immediate kind of effect. And then because of that, you could fine tune your dose in a sense, right? You could have a little bit in 10, 15 minutes, it should have peaked by then. And so you'll know where you're at, and then you can have some more. 15 minutes later, you can have a little, see where you're at, have a little more, and get to a very, fine therapeutic dose. With edibles or tinctures, anything gastrointestinal, it's so much harder to dose properly, just because of how long it takes. You don't know where you're at. So this helps in that way. It still will be tough to dose properly because there's, some patients absorb 3 times the amount that another patient absorbs if you ingest it, right? So
Hmm.
because of that, I can't tell you, hey, this is going to be the dose that works for you. It's going to be more of a how to build up properly.
Copy that. Well, that's truly fascinating, and I'm really happy to know that, Justin.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
Wow. So, what looking ahead again about what's unique there at Dragonfly, or excuse me, not
yeah.
Dragonfly. Strike that from the record.
No
But
worries.
yeah, Perfect Earth. You
Yeah,
mentioned there are two locations.
yeah, yeah. So we
Hmm.
have a location in Logan, and we also have a location. The one that I'm at is in Ogden.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the Logan was the second. So Dragonfly opened up first, and then there was Logan, and then we
Hmm.
were the third to open up as well.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's no, I mean, it's been great. I mean, having two locations is helpful as well because sometimes if we run out of an item and Logan has it, we could look there pretty easily and send over there. Most of these pharmacies now are having online menus though, so now we could refer to any of the ones that are close, which we do as well. But yeah, having two locations definitely is helpful, especially for staffing and help on having the other pharmacist in Logan's great as a resource to to shoot ideas off of too.
Hmm. Are you the only pharmacist on staff?
No, so we have two pharmacists. So when I'm not there, our other part-time pharmacist Fern, she's there, and then we also have some fill-in pharmacists as well. That if we neither I or Fern are working, then we could have other people work as well. So yeah, we have four total, but two that consistently are working.
Awesome.
And then I mean that's at Ogden specifically, and then we in Logan we have Sam Warner, and he's the pharmacist in charge up there. And if he ever needs time off and that kind of thing, then we have we're open in a little bit longer in Ogden, so we need more than just one pharmacist for full time. But Logan a little bit slower than we are, so they're able to get by with just the one.
So have you been having difficulties supply issues on your end, or is that something that has been altogether you've been free of?
No, the supply is probably the biggest problem right now with the program.
Everywhere.
Is
Okay, with the
yeah,
program at
yeah,
large.
it's just we have a lot of patients that come in and then are rightfully frustrated that we don't have their medication in stock, right? Or sometimes if like we only have like one strain of flower, or not even like the kind of cartridge or anything like that they need. And it's frustrating having so much supply just wait, like that's made and ready to go, and we're just waiting for testing to come back or something like that for it to be released. But it's not even just that. It's not even just like the lab testing that's a hurdle, but it's just the amount of cultivators that have licenses. There's 8 that were given, and it just has not been enough time for everyone to get up and running to a full capacity, right? Like our grow included, right? We have the small scale one. We're building a large scale one. So I mean, this is just a guess. I'm really basing it just off of how long it's going to take cultivation to get up and running to a full capacity. But a lot of the cultivation sites are going to have their bigger facilities running pretty smoothly. I'm hoping in around by March or so. So I'm hoping by around March, a lot of these issues will start to be resolved. I'm hoping variety goes up. I'm hoping prices come down, right? We need to be able to supply medication at a reasonable cost to patients too.
Yeah. So what are the pricing issues? What have you seen that as a frustration for many patients?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with that said, it's understandable for a new program, but as long as it doesn't stay that way, that'll be good, right? So, if I'm not mistaken, I've just have heard this. I haven't actually researched it myself, but when Colorado first started out, their prices were a lot higher. I've heard that they've been comparable to ours. And it's just once we have more of a supply, if we could get product from California and Colorado, to ease the supply concerns, we would, but we can't take it across state lines, so we can't. And so until we just start producing properly here, it's going to be an issue. And but that's got to be one of the number one things that Department of Health and other people should be working on right now. I know that they are. But we have to.
Agree. So what is one of the most common things people seek your advice for on a regular basis, Justin?
Yeah. So this is more of a guess, but generally it's most patients are going to be are pain, right? Yeah. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of neuropathic pain that patients come in for. But I mean, we get everything, but I mean, there's a lot of how do I use this during the day if I'm having pain during the day, and how do I do this and stay functional. So sometimes there's going to be some sort of compromise in a sense of, like I was saying before, during the day there's going to be the difference between potentially pain relief and functionality and what you emphasize there. There's ways to make it so you're not getting as much of that psychotropic high kind of feeling, right? If you add CBD, it's going to dampen that down. Depending on how much you add, depends on how much it dampens down, right? If you get upwards of a 10 part CBD, 1 part THC, that's going to minimize the high feeling almost altogether, if not altogether. So if you're still trying to get some of the benefits, add more CBD, or really it comes more down to just dose, right? And how that dose is affecting you. So it's better to not experiment. If you have to be doing things during the day and you need to be more functional, it's going to be better like on the weekend to experiment a little bit more to see what you're comfortable with. But even then, I try to educate patients that, if you find a dose that's comfortable when you're in a comfortable situation, that's one thing. But when you then implement that same dose when you're working and that kind of thing, that might be a different kind of thing, especially for, I should emphasize this, especially for new patients. New patients are the ones that are more likely to have the paranoia or anxiety associated with higher THC doses, right? And so if they're first starting out, they're a new patient, but they're trying to get some relief. We really try to emphasize starting low, building up slowly, and then how to minimize that kind of potential paranoia, anxiety. Because I'd really emphasize that you can't overdose from cannabis or anything like that. Really what we're trying to do is find the minimum effective dose, so you're not building up a tolerance for no reason, right? And also, you're trying to, find a minimum effective dose, but also just trying to not get too much of that psychotropic head high paranoia, and trying to avoid that as well.
Thank you. Justin, a question about for when you're treating patients, either seasoned or more experienced patients or earlier patients, do you have any advice for patients about how to track and maintain and keep an eye on what the dosage is doing for them, how they should incorporate being more observant and tracking those things to help you better treat and work with them?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the medicalcannabis.utah.gov, they have some documents and resources that patients could use, but you could just find this anyway. There's some like diary kind of tracking or logs that you could use, and I would really emphasize using those, because this is all patient-centered dosing. It's not, hey, take this exactly and then come back in 30 days, right? It's nothing like that. It's finding what works for the patient, right? And so giving them the tools that they need to track properly. So tracking strain, tracking how much you're taking, and then rating that on a scale of how effective it was for you, is all important information, because we could isolate, okay, this patient has been responding better to edibles versus tinctures. There's going to be a lot of variability that affects what kind of product we're recommending to the patient, and the more information that we have, the better we could make a proper recommendation.
Right. So as a pharmacist, you keep tabs on what medications your patients are consuming and when. Is that right? So do you utilize that information on an ongoing basis, and how so?
Yeah. And so, in the initial consultation, we go over medications and that kind of thing. And just to, it just really helps us if you get a medication list. It'll definitely help us make a better decision, right? Because just looking at a medication list, I could tell you what conditions you're being treated for, right? That aren't. Sometimes cannabis could help, sometimes it can't, because sometimes a patient will come in for pain, and then they are on some anxiety medications, and then I could talk to them about that, right? And so they didn't think, maybe I shouldn't. I didn't even think that this would be an option for anxiety, and now we could discuss that. So having a medication list is helpful. It also is just helpful that there are interactions that are important, right? If a patient stabilized on warfarin and then implements cannabis, they could have a life-threatening bleed if they haven't had cannabis before, right? And so knowing that and then preventing that from happening in the first place is very important. So there's not a lot of interactions with cannabis that are that severe. Only that one is that severe, but there are some important ones that we really need to make sure that we look at before implementing it if they're new.
For instance, could you give us a quick précis of some of those?
Yeah, some more of the important ones so warfarin or Coumadin, anticoagulant medication, that one would be really important. Getting the specifics of it basically, there's two mechanisms. Both of them use a similar, so cannabis, CBD and THC specifically, so can inhibit the enzymes that break warfarin down. So there's going to be more in your system, which means more of a chance of a bleed, but also both are highly protein bound in your blood. And so that's inactive. And then THC will come in, or CBD will come in and kick that off and make a lot of warfarin available to have a life-threatening bleed. And it's just, there's a risk there. But some other important medications would be like anti-rejection medications, like tacrolimus. There's a chance that if you're using that for, you've had a kidney transplant or something like that, there's a higher chance if you implement cannabis that you could, your body will reject the organ, right? It would be very, very important to know that. And then there's, there's a lot of interactions with regards to liver metabolism, that kind of thing. But, things like valproate, usually used commonly for seizures and that kind of thing. Clobazam as well, commonly used for seizures. And so that's actually a tough thing if a patient comes in for using, for seizures, I should say, and then we're going to implement, a dosing protocol, then we really do need to look at their medications, because some of them will be increased, some of there could be issues with liver damage and that kind of thing. And then there's going to be a lot that they say are important interactions, and it kind of depends. So like, for example, some of the SSRIs, basically, those are depression medications generally, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them the concentration could be increased by a little bit if you implement cannabis, but it's rare that it's going to be clinically significant. If it's taken the patient a long time to get stabilized on a dose, then maybe that will be more of a concern. And this will just be more of a thing where I, educate patients about it and what to watch out for. And then, if they feel like it's, taking away from them, then we could always discuss with their doctor and kind of figure out what kind of alternative we could have.
Wow. Thank you, Justin. That's really informative. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Everyone, I'm sure, in our readership will be grateful to have those tidbits of info. And if they need more, they can either visit you there at the pharmacy in Ogden at Perfect Earth Apothecary. A little difficult to say sometimes.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. 2 locations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anything else you'd care to add to this conversation? Things that you feel have been overlooked that patients ought to know? Or
yeah, I mean, one of the more urgent things that patients should know is, there's 2 ways to get medical cannabis, right? There's the primary way is getting a card through the Department of Health, right? But getting a letter right now is going to be good till the end of the year. But letters will no longer work at the end of the year, right? Or on January 1, they'll no longer work. And so if you are using a letter and you don't have a card yet, it'd be good to get that going as soon as possible, just because the longer you wait, the more the Department of Health is going to get bogged down, I'm sure. There's going to be thousands and thousands of patients all trying to get a card at once, right? All of these letter patients. Are you
surprised at the number of patients coming through your doors?
No, I mean, it's more than the data that the Department of Health had, right? The numbers have pretty much surpassed everything that we were expecting. And so it's just cool to see how many patients are now able to get medication here legally. And there's still a lot of patients that I know that are worried and are still going out of state, right? That don't come into the pharmacy, that don't even have a card and that kind of thing. There's, so the sooner we can make this more accessible, affordable for patients, the more people we'll be able to help. So, but no, it's been a cool thing to see the how much our patients' lives have been changing because of this, right? Patients coming off on opioids or other medications is it's so cool to see. Or a lot of the patients that come in, it's their last shot at some type of treatment, right? There's a lot of times where a patient just tells me, this is, my doctor sent me here because I've tried everything else. This is the last thing I could, that they have an idea for, right? And it's just, people need help, and the more easily we can make that accessible to them and provide good medicine as well. So, the lab data and everything like that too. It's all heading in the right direction. I'm proud of everybody that's been working towards it. Obviously, it's not where we want it to be, right? I'm not trying to say that everything's great right now, but definitely heading in the right direction. And the work that all these people are putting in, like on my side, but in all these different pharmacies, all different cultivation sites, processing everywhere. It's cool to see.
Excellent. Well, Justin Jennings, thank you so much, pharmacist at the Perfect Earth Apothecary. Mm-hmm. We're so grateful. Everyone here at the Green Scene's really grateful you spent some time with us today. And with that, I guess we're about done here with our time limit, I'm afraid, because of Zoom.
Okay.
But have a lovely day, Justin, and thanks for sharing some of your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Yeah. Abraham, thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.